Self-fully described. Part 3. Philosopher, no, you are not being criticized because as Adler's teleology tells us, no matter what has occurrences in your life up to this point, what has occurrence, what has occurred in your life, what has occurred in your life up to this point should have no bearing at all on how you live from now on. That you living in the here and now are the one who determines your own life. My life is determined at this exact point. Yes, philosopher, yes, because the past does not exist. Youth. All right, well, I don't agree with your theories 100%. There are many points I am not convinced about, and that I would argue against. At the same time, your theories are worth further consideration, and I am definitely interested in learning more about Adlerian psychology. I have had enough for tonight, but I hope you won't mind if I come again next week. If I don't take a break, I think my head might burst. Philosopher, I am sure you need some time on your own to think again. I am always here, so you can visit whenever you like. I enjoyed it. Thank you. Let's talk again. You great. One last thing, if I may, our discussion today was long and got pretty intense, and I guess I spoke rather rudely. For that, I would like to apologize. Philosopher, don't worry about it. You should read Plato's dialogue. The conduct and language of these disciples of Socrates are surprisingly loose. That's the way a dialogue is supposed to be. The second night, all problems are interpersonal relationship problems. The young man was as good as his word. Exactly 1 week later, he returned to the philosopher's study. Truth be told, he had felt the urge to rush back, but back there only 2 or 3 days after his first visit. He had turned things over in his mind very carefully, and his doubts had turned to certainty. Certainty, in short, teleology, the attributing of the purpose of a given phenomena rather than its cause was a sophistry, and the existence of trauma was beyond question. People cannot simply forget the past, and neither they can become free from it. Today, the young man decided he had thoroughly dismantled this eccentric philosopher's theory and settle matters once and for all. Why you dislike yourself, youth? So after last time, I claimed myself down. I calmed myself down, focused, and thought things over. And yet, I have got to say, I still can't agree with your theories, philosopher O. What do you find questionable about them? Well, for instance, the other day I admitted that I dislike myself. No matter what I do, I can't find anything but shortcomings, and I still see no reason why I had start liking myself. But of course, I still want to. You explain everything as having to do with goals. But what kind of goal could I have here? I mean, what kind of advantage could there be in my not liking myself? I can't imagine there had be a single thing to gain from it. Philosopher, I say, you feel that you don't have any strong points, that you have got nothing but shortcomings. Whatever the facts might be, that's how you feel. In other words, your self-esteem is extremely low. So the question here then are why do you feel so wrenched, and why do you view yourself with such low esteem? Youth, because it's fact, I really don't have any strong points. Philosopher, you are wrong. You notice only your shortcoming because you have resolved to not start liking yourself. in order to not like yourself. You don't see your strong points and focus only on your shortcomings. First, understand this point. You, I have resolved to not start liking myself. Philosopher, that's right. To you, not liking yourself is about you. Youth, why, what for? Philosopher, perhaps that is something you should think about yourself. What sort of shortcoming do you think you have, youth? I am sure you have already noticed. First of all, that's there is my personality. I don't have any self-confidence, and I am always pessimistic about everything. And I guess I am too self-conscious because I worry about what other people see, and then I live with a constant distrust of other people. I can never act naturally. There is always something theatrical about what I say and do. And it's not just my personality. There is nothing to like about my face and my body either. A philosopher, when you go about listing your shortcomings like that, what kind of mood does it put you in? You think, wow, that's nasty and unpleasant mood. Naturally, I am sure that no one would want to get involved with a guy as wrapped as me. If there were any more, if there were anyone dispatched and bothersome in my vicinity, I had keep my distance too. Philosopher, I see. Well, that settles it then. Youth, what do you mean, philosopher? It might be hard to understand from your own example, so I'll use another. I used to study for simple counseling session. It must have been quite a few years ago, but there was a female student who came by. She sat right where you are sitting now in their same chair. Well, her concern was her fear of blushing. She told me that she was always turning red whenever she was out in public and that she would do anything to rid herself of this. So I asked her, well, if you can cure it, what will you want to do? And she said that there was a man she wanted. She secretly had feelings for him, but wasn't ready to divulge them. Once her fear of flushing was cured, she had confessed her desire to be with him. Youth. All right, it sounds like a typical thing a female student would seek counseling for in order for her to confess her feelings for him. First, she had to cure her blushing problem. Philosopher, but is that really the whole case? I have a different opinion. Why did she said this fear of blushing, and why hadn't it gotten better? But she needed that symptom of blushing. Youth, what are you saying exactly? She was asking you to cure it, wasn't she? Philosopher, what do you think was the scariest thing to her? Yeah, and the thing she wanted to avoid most of all, it was that the men would reject her, of course. The fact that her unrequired love would negate everything for her, the very existence and possibility of I. This aspect is deeply present in adolescent unrequited love, but as long as she has a fear of blushing, she can go on thinking, I can't be with him because I have this fear of blushing. It could end without her ever working up the courage to confess her feelings for him, and should have should and she could convince herself that he would reject her anyway. And finally, she can live in the possibility that if only my fear of blushing had gotten better, I could have youth. Okay, so she fabricated that fear of blushing as an excuse for her own inability to confess her feelings, for maybe a kind of insurance for when we reject her. Philosopher, yes, you could put it that way. Youth, okay, that is an interesting interpretation, but if that were really the case, wouldn't it be possible to do anything to help her? Since she simultaneously meets that fear of blushing and is suffering because of it, There had been no end to her troubles. The philosopher well that this is what I told her. Fear of blushing is easy to cure. She asked really. I went on, but I will not cure it. She pressed me. Why? I explained, look, it's thanks to you, to your fear of blushing, that you can accept your dissatisfaction about with yourself and the world around you, and with a life that is not going well. It's thanks to you, fear of blushing, and it's caused by it. She asked, how could it be? I went on, if I did cure it and nothing in your situation changed at as well well, what would you do? You had probably come here and say, give me back my fear of passion, and that would be beyond my abilities. Youth, philosopher. Her story certainly it's not unusual. Students preparing for their exams think if I pass, life will be rosy. Company workers think if I get transferred, everything will go well. But when those wishes are fulfilled, in many cases, nothing about their situations changes at all. Youth, indeed. Philosopher, when a client shows up requesting a cure from fear of flushing, the counselor must not cure the symptom. Then recovery is likely to be even more difficult. That is the Adlerian psychology way of thinking about this kind of thing. Yes, so what specifically do you do then? Do you ask what they are worried about and then just leave it be? Philosopher, she did not have a confidence in herself. She was very afraid that things being what they are, he had rejected her even if he had confessed to him, and if that happened, she had lose even more confidence and got hurt. That's why she created the symptom of the fear of flushing. What I can do is to get the person first to accept myself now, and then regardless of the outcome, has the courage to step forward. In Adlerian psychology, the kind of approach is called encouragement. Encouragement what? Philosopher, yes. I'll explain symmetrically what it consists of once our discussion has progressed a little further. We are not at that stage yet. Youth, that works for me. In the meantime, I get the word encouragement in mind. So whatever happened to her philosopher. Apparently, she had a chance to join a group of friends and spend time with the men, and in the end, it was he who confessed his desire to be with her. Of course, she never dropped by his study again after that. I don't know what become of her fear of flushing, but she probably didn't need it any longer. Youth, yes, she clearly didn't have any use for it anymore. Philosopher, that's right. Now, keeping the student story in mind, let's think about your problem. You say that at present you notice only your shortcomings, and it is unlikely that you will ever come to like yourself. And then you said, I am sure that no one would want to get involved with a guy as wrapped as me. I am sure you understand this already. Why do you dislike yourself? Why do you focus only on your shortcomings? And why have you decided to not start liking yourself? It is because you are overly afraid of being disliked by other people and getting hurt in your interpersonal relationship. Youth, what do you mean by that? Philosopher, just like the young women with the fear of blushing, who are afraid of being rejected by a man. You are afraid of being negated by other people. You are afraid of being treated disparagingly, being refused, and sustaining deep mental wounds. You think that instead of getting entangled in such a situation, it would be better if you don't have relations with anyone in the first place. In other words, your goal is to not get hurt in your relationship with other people. Youth, philosopher, now how can that goal be realized? The answer is easy. Just find your shortcomings, start disliking yourself, and become someone who does not enter into interpersonal relationship. That way, if you can shut yourself into your own shell, you won't have to interact with anyone, and you will even have a justification ready whatever other people snub whenever other people snub you. That it's because of your shortcomings that you get snubbed, and if things were not this way, you too could be loved. Youth, haha. Well, you have really put me in my place now, philosopher. Don't be irreversible, being the way I am, with all these shortcomings, is for you a precious virtue. In other words, something that is to your benefit. Youth, ouch, that hurts. What a sadist you are, diabolical, diabolical. Okay, yes, it's true. I am afraid. I don't want to get hurt in interpersonal relationship. I'm terrified of being snubbed for who I am. It's hard to admit it, but you are right, philosopher. Admitting is a good attitude, but don't forget it is basically impossible to not get hurt in your relations with other people. When you enter into interpersonal relationship, it is inevitable that to a greater or lesser extent you will get hurt, and you will hurt someone too. Adler says to get rid of one's problem, all one can do is live in the universe all alone, but one can't do such a thing. All problems are interpersonal relationship problems. Wait a minute, I'm supposed to just let that one slip by to get rid of one's problems. All one can do is live in the universe all alone. What do you mean by that? If you lived all alone, wouldn't you be horribly lonely? Philosopher, oh, but being alone is not what make you feel lonely. Loneliness is having other people and society and community around you and having a deep sense of being excluded from them. To feel lonely, we need more other people. This is to say, it is only in a social context that a person becomes an individual. Youth. If you were really alone, that is, if you existed completely alone in the universe, you would not be an individual and you would not feel lonely either. Philosopher, I suppose that the very concept of loneliness wouldn't even come up. You wouldn't need language, and there had no use for logic or common sense either. But such a thing is impossible. Even if you lived in on an uninhabited island, uninhabited island, you would think about someone far across the ocean. If you are spend your nights alone, you strain your ears to hear the sound someone's breath. As long as there is someone out there somewhere, you will be haunted by loneliness, youth. But then you could just rephrase that if you could live in the universe all alone, one's problem would go away. Couldn't you, philosopher? In theory, yes, as Adler goes so far as to assert all problems are interpersonal relationships problems. Youth, can you say that again? Philosopher, we can repeat it as many times you like. All problems are interpersonal relationship problems. This is a concept that runs to a very root of Adlerian psychology. If all interpersonal relationships were gone from this world, which is to say, if one were alone in the universe and all other people were gone, all manner of problems would disappear. Youth, that's a lie. It's nothing more than academic sophistry. Philosopher, of course, we cannot do without interpersonal relationship. A human being's existence in its very essence assumes the existence of other human beings. Living completely separate from others is in principle impossible. As You are indicated the premise if one could live all alone in the universe is unsound. Youth, that is not the issue I am talking about. Sure, interpersonal relationships are probably a big problem. That much I acknowledge, but to say that everything comes down to interpersonal relationship problems, now that's really an extreme position. What about the worry of being cut off from interpersonal relationship, the kind of problems that an individual agonizes over as an individual, problems directed to oneself? Do you deny all that, philosopher? There is no such thing as worry that is completely defined by the individual. So called internal worry does not exist. Whatever the worry that may arise, the shadows of other people are always present. Youth, but still, you are a philosopher. Human beings are loftier, greater problems than things like interpersonal relationship. What is happiness? What is freedom? And what is the meaning of life? Are not these the themes that philosophers have been investigating ever since the problem ancient Greeks? And you are saying, so what? Interpersonal relationships are everything. It seems kind of pedestrian to me. It's hard to believe that a philosopher would say such thing. Philosopher, well then it seems there is a need to explain things a bit more concretely. Youth, yes, please do. If you are going to tell me that you are a philosopher, then you have got to really explain things, or else this makes no sense. Philosopher, you were so afraid of interpersonal relationship that you come to dislike yourself. You have avoided interpersonal relationship by disliking yourself. These assertions shook the youth to his very core. The word had an undeniable truth that seemed to pierce his heart. Even so, he had to find a clear rebuttal to the statement that all the problems that people experience are interpersonal relationship problem. Hitler was trivializing people's issue. The problem I am suffering from are not so mundane. Feeling of inferiority are subjective assumption. Philosopher, let's look at the interpersonal relationship from a slightly different perspective. Are you philosopher with the term feeling of inferiority? Youth, what a silly question. As you can surely tell from our discussion up to now, I am just a huge blob of feeling of inferiority. Philosopher, what are those feelings specifically? Youth, well, for instance, if I see something in a newspaper about a person around my age, someone who's really successful, I am always overcome with these feelings of inferiority. If someone else who is lived the same amount of time is is so successful, then what on earth am I doing for my with myself? Or when I see a friend who seems happy before I even feel like celebrating with him. I am filled with envy and frustration. Of course, the pimple covered face doesn't help matter. And I have got strong feelings of inferiority when it comes to my education and occupation. And then there is a my income and social standing. I guess I am just completely riddled with feeling of inferiority. Philosopher, I see. Incidentally, Adler is thought to be the first to use the term feeling of inferiority in the kind of context in which it is spoken of today. Youth, I don't know that. Philosopher, in Adler's native German, the word is minder, verting, vertig, Gefühl, which means feeling, Gefühl, to of having less, minder worth, less worth. So, feeling of inferiority has to do with one's value of judgment of oneself. Youth, value judgment, philosopher. It is the feeling that one has no worth, or that one is worth only so much. youth, and that's a feeling I know well. That's me in a nutshell. Not a day goes by without me uh, tormenting myself that there is no point in being alive. Philosopher, well then let's have a look at my own feeling of inferiority. When you first met me, when you first met me, what is your impression in terms of physical characteristics? Youth, well, philosopher, there is no need to hold back. Be direct. Youth, all right. I guess you were similar than I had imagined, smaller than I had imagined. Philosopher, thank you. I am 61 inches tall. Adler was apparently around the same height. There was a time until I was right around your age. Actually, when I was concerned about my height, I am sure that things would be different if I were of average weight, 8 or even just 4 inches taller, and as if a more enjoyable life were waiting for me. I talked to a friend about it when I was having these feelings, and he said it was a bunch of nonsense and simply dismissed it. Youth, that's horrible. Some friend, philosopher, and then he said, what would you do if you got taller? You know, you have got a gift from for getting people to relax. With the man who is big and strong, it's true. It does seem he can end up intimidating people just because of his size. With someone small like me, the on the other hand, people let go of their worriness. So it made me realize that having a small build is a desirable thing, both to me and to those around me. In other words, there was a transformation of values. I am not worried about my height anymore. Youth, okay, but that's philosopher wait until I am finished. The important thing here is my height is 61 inches was not inferior. Youth, it was not inferior. Philosopher, it was not. In fact, lacking in or lesser than something. Sure, my 61 inches is lesser than the average height and an objectively measured number. At first glance, one might think it inferior, but the issue is really what sort of meaning I attribute to that height, what sort of value I give it. Youth, what does it mean? Philosopher, my feeling about my height were all subjective feeling of inferiority which arose entirely through my comparing myself to others. That is to say, in my interpersonal relationships, because if there had not been anyone with whom to compare myself, I would not have had any occasion to think I was short. Right now, you two are suffering from various feelings of inferiority, but please understand that what you are feeling is not an objective inferiority, but a subjective feeling of inferiority. Even within an issue like height, it is all reduced to its subjectivity. Youth, in other words, the feeling of inferiority we are suffering from our subjective interpretation rather than objective facts. Philosopher, exactly. Seeing it from my friend's point of view, that I get people to relax and or that don't intimidate them. Such aspects can become strong points. Of course, this is a subjective interpretation. You could even say it's an attributable assumption. However, there is one good thing about subjectivity. It allows you to make your own choices precisely because I am leaving it to subjectivity. The cause, the choice to view my height is either an advantage or disadvantage is left upon me. The argument that you can choose a new lifestyle. Philosopher, that's right. We cannot alter objective facts, but subjective interpretation can be altered as much as one likes, and we are inhabitants of a subjective world. We talk about this at the very beginning, right? The well water that is 60 degrees philosopher. Now remember the German word, a feeling of inferiority. As I mentioned a moment ago, a feeling of inferiority is a term that has to do with one's value judgment of someone. So, what on earth could this value be? Could this value be okay? Take diamonds, for instance, which are traded at a high value or a currency. We find for a particular value of these things and say that 1 carat is this much, that price are such and such. But if you change your point of view, a diamond is nothing but a little stone. Youth, well, intellectually, it is a philosopher. In other words, value is something that is based on a social context. The value given to a $1 bill is not an objective attributed value, though that might be a common sense approach. If one consider its actual cost as printed material, the value is nowhere near the dollar. I was the only person. I was the only person in this world, and no one else existed. I had probably be putting those $1 bill in my fireplace in winter time. Maybe I'll be using them to blow my nose. Following exactly the same logic, there should have been no reason at all for me to worry about my height. If you was the only person in this world and no one else existed. Philosopher, yes, the problem of value, problem of value in the end it brings us back as interpersonal relationship again. You to this concept to what you were saying about all problems being interpersonal relationship problems. Philosopher, yes, that's correct.